Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام عليك يا صفوة الأنبياء والمرسلين. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال الله تعالى في القرآن الكريم: إنا أعطيناك الكوثر. صدق الله العظيم وبلغنا رسوله النبي الكريم. وقد صدقت أنت يا سيدي يا سيدي يا سيدي يا سيدي يا مكي يا مدني يا عربي يا قرشي يا هاشمي. ويا سيدنا يا سيدنا يا سيدنا يا حبيبنا يا طبيبنا يا حبيب المصطفى صلى الله تعالى عليه وآله وسلم. Respected elders and brothers in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. On another auspicious occasion of Jumatul Mubarak, I have the opportunity to speak with you. And today I want to discuss something which is very pertinent and very troubling at the same time. That in the space of just a few weeks, the religion of Islam, the deen of Islam has been attacked in all angles. The first attack came from a movie, a despicable movie that was made by the name of Lady of Heaven. Now the name of the movie is a beautiful name, Khatun-e-Jannat, Lady of Heaven. But the contents of this movie is completely against the Quran, against the Sunnah, and against the companions of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now before I go into a background about this movie, in the past couple of weeks I was discussing the importance of Muhammad Mustafa, the love of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how the love of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is Iman. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that none of you will truly believe, none of you will truly have Iman until you love me more than your own parents, until you love me more than your own children, until you love me more than anything in this dunya. And when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I talked about how he gave Mubarak, he said, Tuba liman ra'ani wa amila bi. Mubarak to those who saw me and believed in me. And then he said, Tuba sab'a marratin, that Mubarak saat martaba Mubarak di. जिसने मुझे देखा भी नहीं लेकिन मुझसे they will believe in me. And जब, when my Murshid Hazrat Allama Saqib Shami, when they narrated this hadith, they made this very pertinent point. They said, why did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say Tuba sab'a marrat? Why did he use, why number 7? Why not 6 times Mubarak? Why not 5 times? Why not 10 times Mubarak? Why number 7? And they said, David Jan said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam Hindu Pak ki boli jante hain. Hindu Pak ki boli jab khushi aati hai, to kya kehte hain? Sat sat mubarak, sat sat mubarak. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is speaking in our language, and they're saying in your language, sat sat mubarak. Meaning, you won't see me, but you will say, Fidaka abi wa ummi ya Rasulullah. May my mother and my father be sacrificed to you. And remember, the connection between the love of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that one of the definitions of love was al-hifzu wal-imsak, that you protect and you prevent. So anyone who tries to attack your beloved, then you have to raise your voice. You will not be able to sleep at night if your beloved has been attacked. Sultan Salahuddin Ayyubi, the great warrior of Islam, he did not sleep for days when he heard that some individual has disrespected the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And remember, a lot of people say that, oh, so what if they are disrespected? Why are you raising your voice? You are making it more problematic. And they say, look, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam apne dushman ko maaf kiya hai. Aap bhi maaf kar dijiye. You also forgive them. But what do we say? We say Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam forgived his own dushman. That does not mean that we can forgive his enemies on his behalf. Meaning, if you want to look at the character of how you treat the enemies of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, you don't look at the mercy of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, because those are his enemies. He has a right to forgive them. But when you want to know how to deal with the enemies of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then you look at the character of the Sahaba. How did the Sahaba deal with the enemies of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And coming to the importance of the Sahaba, this movie, that Lady of Heaven, this has been produced by a extremist Shia preacher, a Rawafid preacher. I remember, we do not class the whole community, the Shia community, as responsible for this movie, because a majority of the Shia community have blacklisted, have boycotted this movie. But nevertheless, it is important to mention that there is a fringe community amongst them who have portrayed the Sahaba, Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Umar. And if you remember in the last Jummah, I discussed the rank of Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu, and I mentioned the hadith of love and how they showed their love for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. How Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu said that the most beloved thing to me is that I see the beautiful face of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The most beloved thing to me is that I give my wealth to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the most beloved thing to me is that I give my daughter to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is Sayyidina Abu Bakr. Sayyidina Abu Bakr, that is Sayyidina Abu Bakr, which Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that the sun has not risen over anyone greater than Sayyidina Abu Bakr except a prophet. The sun has not risen over anyone greater than Abu Bakr except a prophet. And that's Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that if there was a Nabi after me, it would be Umar. So it is about these personalities that in the movie they have depicted as villains. They have depicted as killers of the daughter of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Such fabrications and such lies that they have depicted the great characters and personalities of Islam that over a billion Muslims, Sunni Muslims in the world, they revere. And they have depicted them as terrorists. And you know, there are people who are talking about freedom of speech, and there's been a few interviews on Sky News and other news channels where they are trying to say that this movie, right, so what if they are portraying their own view? It's not just a portraying of view, because this is actually incitement of hatred. It's incitement of violence. Because when you are calling the two greatest personalities of Islam, Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, as terrorists, what are they indirectly saying? They're indirectly saying that the vast majority of the Muslim world are terrorist sympathizers. If we follow Sayyidina Abu Bakr, if we follow Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, and they are depicting them as terrorists, what image does that give to the community? That the vast majority of the Muslim world are terrorist sympathizers, they're following terrorists. If this does not incite hatred, if this does not incite sectarian violence, then what else will? So this is why we say that this movie has to be boycotted. And alhamdulillah, around many cinemas in the world, this movie has been removed in many cinemas, if not all of them now. And about the Sahaba, remember, if somebody attacks the Sahaba, they're not just attacking the Sahaba, they're attacking Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. They're not just attacking Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, they're attacking Allah. Why? Because the likes of the great scholars Mujaddid al-Fasani and many scholars, they have mentioned that the Sahaba are like the doors to the house of Islam. If you attack the door, you end up eventually breaking down the house. Because remember, it was through the Sahaba that the deen came to us. So if you attack the character of the Sahaba, then that will open the doors for non-Muslims and criticize of Islam to attack Islam itself. Remember the Quran. The Quran was revealed to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and it was not compiled in the form of a book in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It was written down in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, but it was not compiled in the form of a mushaf. It was compiled in the form of a mushaf by Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq in his khilafah. So the mushaf we have today, the reason why we can read the Quran in the form of a book is because of Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq. So therefore, if someone was to attack Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, it's not an attack on Sayyidina Abu Bakr, it's an attack on the Quran al-Kareem. And in the same way, the hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, how they come to us. They have come to us, what are hadith? The hadiths are narrated from the Sahaba. Sahaba narrated it from the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So if someone was to attack the Sahaba, so they're not only attacking the Quran, they're also attacking the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And remember, Allah says in the Quran about the Sahaba, this is from a theological perspective, that how do we answer those who attacked the great Sahaba of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the companions of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? Because remember, they'll bring certain historical reports that say that so-and-so companion killed so-and-so family of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, which is all bogus and false. But how do we counteract that? They say, no, but this is history. We say, history has its place in Islam. But when it goes against categorical ayat of Quran, we throw history away. Because history can be fabricated. History can have man-made intervention in it. But the Quran cannot have man-made intervention. The Quran is from Allah. And the Quran has made a promise to the Sahaba. Allah says in the Quran, Kullun wa'adullahi lahusna. That Allah has promised every single Sahabi husna. And what is husna? Husna is the greatest form of Jannah. Allah says in other places, Allah describes what husna is. Allah describes the rivers in Jannah, the palaces in Jannah. That is what husna is. And Allah says to every single Sahabi, Kullun wa'adullahi husna. The word kullu has been used. You know, people say kullu means everything, even though the word kullu, it can have mustasna, it can have exceptions. But the principle is al-mutlaqu yajri al-itlaq, that if an ayah of the Quran is unrestricted, unless Allah or His Messenger restricted it themselves, and remember the Quran is mutawatir, so in order to, it is mass transmitted. In order to restrict a mass transmitted ayah, you have to also bring another mass transmission text. Now the Quran is unrestricted. The Quran says, Kullu wa'adullahi al-husna, that every single Sahabi has been promised Jannah, and this has not been restricted by Allah. So we cannot restrict it and say that so-and-so Sahabi is not in Jannah, so-and-so Sahabi is not in Jannah. In fact, every single Sahabi, har Sahabi-e-Nabi, Jannati. This is our Aqidah. And in other places in the Quran, Allah says, Radiyallahu anhum wa radu an. That Allah is pleased with the Sahaba and they are pleased with Allah. Now this movie is depicting the Sahaba as if they are enemies of the Ahlul Bayt. And remember, enemies of the family of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam are indeed enemies of Rasulullah. And enemies of Rasulullah are indeed enemies of Allah. But then Allah says in the Quran, Radiyallahu anhum wa radu an. That Allah is pleased with them and they are pleased with Allah. Now, either you have to say there's a contradiction. Either you say that Allah did not know what they will do, or you would say that those historical reports, they are fabricated. We don't accept these historical reports. Why? Because unless you say that the Quran is wrong, and the Quran can never be wrong, and the Quran is something, this was from anyone other than Allah, you will find many contradictions in it. So our Aqidah, the Aqidah of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, it does not have any contradictions. So when we present the ayat of Quran, and then when we present our version of history, it does not contradict the words of Allah Almighty. And remember, the Sahaba, you know, they are like sitare. You know, what do we say? Ye shan hai khidmat garo ki. The Sahaba are the khidmat gar of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ye shan hai khidmat garo ki. Sardar ka alam kya hoga. Aur ye shan hai in sitaro ki us chand ka alam kya hoga. So remember, attacking the Sahaba eventually leads to attacking the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wa sallam. This is why we say, Jive deen ich Masjid maktab kaaba te Quran hai. Jive deen ich Masjid maktab kaaba te Quran hai. Ive Abu Bakr o Umar te Haidar te Usman hai. Aur chare sache, the char yaar, Abu Bakr, Umar, Usman and Ali. Chare sache, chare suche, और चारे रब दे प्यारे करके सोने ने तरबियत चारे खूब निखारे. Remember, these Sahaba, the tarbiyat was done by who? The tarbiyat was done by the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if they are arguing that the majority of the Sahaba became evildoers, then that's an attack on the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That al-ayazu billah, that the tarbiyat of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was deficient. But we know that those companions who surrounded the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they were the best of all the people. Now, I just want to mention a few points that in this movie, the Lady of Heaven is not only against Islam, but it's also against liberal values. In fact, it's also racist. The villains, the so-called quote-unquote villains who have been depicted in this movie, they have been depicted as black individuals. Now the question is, even though historically these people were not black, why have they been depicted as black? Because this is racism. They are depicting the color black, the race black, as if it's evil. If this is not racist, then I don't know what is. So even on that aspect, it needs to be boycotted. And I want to just put this idea of freedom of speech, they say, no, we can say what we want. Even freedom of speech, we all know that it has its restrictions. You know? Just like racism, for example. If someone was racist, can you say, I have the freedom of speech to be racist? You know, people who speak against Jews, they are called anti-Semitic. Do you have the freedom of speech to speak against homosexuality? The LGBTQ community? What would they call us? They call us homophobic. Right? So speaking against LGBTQ, this is homophobic, this is intolerant. Speaking against the Jewish community, this is anti-Semitic. Speaking against black people is racism, but speaking against Muslims is freedom of speech. What insaf is that? What justice is that? So freedom, remember there was a singer who sang a song against the Holocaust. And this was dubbed as going against the fundamental conventions of liberal values, of peace and tolerance. So speaking against the Holocaust, that's not freedom of speech. But speaking against Muslims, that is freedom of speech. So you have to understand that there is a great fitna that has been arisen about freedom of speech. That freedom of speech is not unrestricted, that it has its restrictions. And we should raise our voice. Remember what I said, that the Prophet ﷺ, yes, he forgave his own enemies. There is this rhetoric going around that we should just forgive them. We shouldn't create such a fuss. But remember, the sunnah is that the Prophet ﷺ would forgive his own enemies. The Sahaba did not forgive the enemies of Rasulullah ﷺ. So what's the sunnah? The sunnah is we should forgive our enemies. We don't forgive the enemies of Rasulullah ﷺ. No, when it comes to our enemies, our zuban doesn't stop. When it comes to our enemies, we don't forgive. But when it comes to the enemies of Rasulullah ﷺ, we don't raise our voice. We've got it the other way around. Rasulullah, the sunnah of Rasulullah ﷺ is that he forgave his own enemies. The Sahaba did not forgive his enemies. So in the same way, we should forgive our enemies, but we should not forgive the enemies of Rasulullah ﷺ. Why? Because Allah does not forgive them. Remember when Abu Lahab, when he raised his hand at the Messenger ﷺ, what did Allah say in the Quran? Tabbat yada abi lahabin wa tab. Abu Lahab raised one hand. What is the other? Adl ka taqaza kya karta hai? One hand for one hand. But what did Allah say? Tabbat yada abi lahabin wa tab. May both hands of Abu Lahab be destroyed. That when it comes to disrespecting the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, we do not look at whether he's got one hand or two hands. We will say that person will be finished. He will be destroyed. He will be destroyed in this dunya and will be destroyed in the hereafter. And I just want to briefly discuss, remember I talked how Islam has been attacked from every single angle. The Sahaba were attacked to the Lady of Heaven, and then this despicable individual in India, the spokesperson for the Indian party, when she disrespected the Messenger of Allah ﷺ and disrespected the wife of Rasulullah ﷺ, Sayyida Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha. And she pointed a finger at the marriage of Rasulullah ﷺ, that, and giving insinuations of al-ayazu billah, pedophilia, that the Prophet ﷺ married a young girl. Remember, our aqidah, our belief is that the Prophet ﷺ did not have intimate relation with the child. This is not our aqidah. Those who portray this aqidah is completely false. Yes, there is a hadith of the Messenger ﷺ. Before I go to this hadith, the irony is that this individual who attacked Islam, if you look at their own works, like the Valmiki Ramyan, she's a Hindu herself, there is a Hindu text called the Valmiki Ramyan. In that text, it says that they own gods Rama and Sita. Rama married Sita at the age of 6. Now they are throwing stones at Islam. They are throwing stones at the character of the Messenger ﷺ, not realizing that they are living in a glass house. The first, answer your own history. And even those who claim to be Christian and they attack Islam, in the book of Numbers in the Bible, in the Old Testament, what does it say in the book of Numbers? In regards when it comes to war, and in war it says that you can kill people, but the young girls, the word in Hebrew is tough. In Arabic we say tifl, a child. Keep the child for yourself. And if you look at the commentaries of the Bible, what does this mean, keep the child for yourself? It means to have intimate relations with them. This is in the Old Testament. Again, we ask the Christians, how dare you attack the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this is in your book? We ask the Jewish community, how dare you attack Islam, and this is in your book? And remember that in the Christian they say, no, but this is in the Old Testament, we don't believe in the Old Testament, we believe in the New Testament. Remember, we ask them, but who revealed the Old Testament? According to them, Jesus is the author of the Old Testament. They believe in the Trinity. They believe that Jesus is God. So God revealed the Old Testament. Jesus is the one who revealed the Old Testament. So according to them, Jesus sanctioned having intimate relations with the child, according to the Old Testament. Now remember, we do not attack them. This is not our mizaj. We do not supposed to attack the religion of other people. But when Islam is attacked, we have the right to say, look, you are living in a glass house. You are not in the position to attack the character of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And even in the Sikh community, the Guru Gobind Singh, he married at a very young age, 13, and the girl was younger than that. So this idea of young marriage from a religious perspective, they cannot attack Islam on this. Now coming to the hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that Sayyidah Aisha radiyallahu anha narrates that he got married to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at the age of 6, and the marriage was consummated at the age of 9. Now, some scholars have gone to this opinion and they say that from different historical reports that she was not actually 6 or 9, but she was actually 16 to 19. This is a valid position within our Sunni community. And the way this is explained is I don't have the time to go into the historical evidences for this, but there are very different historical reports on this, but the way this is explained is that the age at that time used to be calculated from the age of 10. For example, there's another hadith in Bukhari that a 7-year-old boy was leading the prayer. Now we all know the Islamic consensus is that a child cannot lead the prayer. So how did the scholars explain that? They say that this boy was not 7, he was 17. Why? Because they used to calculate the age from the age of 10. So 10 plus 7 is 17. So this is also a Jewish tradition, that this is how they used to calculate the age. From the age of puberty, that's when they used to start the age. So this is how we explain the narration of the 7-year-old praying. He was not 7, he was 17. In the same way, some scholars have said when the Prophet married her at the age of 6 and consummated the age of 9, she was not 6 but actually 16. And she was not 9 but actually 19. This is one position of the scholars. However, the majority of position of the scholars is that they say, no, she did indeed marry Sayyidah Aisha at the age of 6 and the age of 9. I remember I already talked about the other religious communities. They cannot attack the Prophet ﷺ. But from a liberal perspective, remember, from a liberal perspective, they put certain, arbitrary ages. For example, the legal age of marriage is 16 or 18. So therefore, in one country, you be classed as a paedophile, and in another country you won't. This is how arbitrary it is. So, if a girl is 15 and just one day before her 16th birthday, if you were to have intimate relations, you will be classed as a paedophile. But the one day later you're not. Now this defies common sense. Islam is holistic. Islam says that when it comes to marrying a woman, first of all, it is categorically prohibited to have intimate relations with a child. Right? And I will answer, how do we explain that Sayyidah Aisha was 9 when the Prophet was consummated the marriage? We believe that at the age of 9, Sayyidah Aisha was not a child, she was a fully fledged adult. And now you may say, now they look at their own children, own nieces and nephews at the age of 9, and they say, look, they are children. But remember, this is called geocentrism, where we adopt the cultures of today, and we juxtapose it on 1400 years ago. Remember, in Islam, and nor in history, the idea of teenage phase does not exist. This teenage phase, this is a post-1900 concoction. In Islam, we have a child, when he reaches the age of puberty, he becomes a fully fledged adult. This is why in our history we have the likes of Muhammad bin Qasim, who conquered countries. We have great warriors of Islam who conquered countries in their teenage age. And now we have teenagers playing PlayStation. Do you see how the comparison is invalid? That the comparison is completely invalid. Now a 9-year-old mentally may be a child, but in the time of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a 9-year-old was not a child. And the proof for that is that this was socially acceptable. In fact, Sayyidah Aisha radiyallahu anha, she was engaged before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In fact, Sayyidah Aisha, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu, like I mentioned, he is the one who offered his daughter to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why did, in the time of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there were attacks from all angles. They used to find any excuse to attack the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But not even the disbelievers, not a single disbeliever attacked the marriage to Sayyidah Aisha. You will not find a single narration where the kuffar or the mushrikeen, who were the greatest enemies of Islam, who ever attacked the marriage of Sayyidah Aisha. What does this show you? That not only it was the norm of the time, and it was the norm for 1300 years. Do you know the legal age of marriage in the States up to the 1900s, in all states of America, was 10? So this shows, look, the play of Shakespeare. How old is Juliet in Romeo and Juliet? Juliet is 13. Now if I was to make a play now, and Romeo was a lot older, if I was to make a play now, they'll call it child abuse. But they were living in a different context. This is called geocentrism. It's a fallacy in sociological and anthropographical reasoning to apply the customs, the norms of today to 1400 years ago. So when we speak to atheists, non-Muslims, we ask them, look, if a woman is biologically mature, if she is mentally mature, and it is accepted by the societal norm, what is wrong with that? And we know when a woman reaches the age of puberty that she is biologically mature. From an evolutionary perspective, she's able to bear children, so biologically she is mature. Now they may say today, a 9-year-old child is not mentally mature, nor is he socially accepted. But in the time of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a 9-year-old was mentally mature, such that Sayyidah Aisha, if the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam married a child, and we know that in the child marriage the effects has the effects on the psychological aspect of a human. But we know that with Sayyidah Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she transmitted 1/3 of the religion to us. Does this sound like it had a psychological effect on Sayyidah Aisha? She was the teacher of many Sahaba Ikram. She was a master of genealogy. She was a master of the poetry of Jahiliyyah. This was the maqam of Sayyidah Aisha radiyallahu anha, to claim that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam married a child and therefore he had a psychological effect on her. You do not know the seerat of Sayyidah Aisha radiyallahu anha. Right? And I just want to finish with this beautiful share of Ubayd al-Raza. He says that kis tarah ho bayan rifat Aisha jab hai Quran mein midhat Aisha. Remember, we are defending Sayyidah Aisha radiyallahu anha. For Allah Almighty Himself, when the slander was given to Sayyidah Aisha, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam remained silent. And some people say, why did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam remain silent? Did he not know that Sayyidah Aisha was pure? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew the reason why he stayed silent, because he wanted Allah to declare in the Quran the purity of Sayyidah Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala. So till the day of judgment, we will do tilawat of the purity of Sayyidah Aisha till the day of judgment. Kis tarah ho bayan rifat Aisha jab hai Quran mein midhat Aisha tayyiba tahira sayyida zahida marhaba marhaba azmat Aisha alima fadila muftiya aap hai bayan char su hikmat Aisha o abida sajida hafiza aap hai mujhse kya ho bayan izzat Aisha और मोहसिना आप हैं अहले इस्लाम की, मोहसिना आप हैं अहले इस्लाम की, देख लो सीरत Aisha. May Allah give us the ability to respect the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to respect the wives of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and every single Sahabi of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And may Allah give us the ability to live and die upon the Aqeedah of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Wa ma alayna illa al-balagh.